Welcome to our inaugural Red Hat ANZ Forum in 2016. This idea was spawned out of our Red Hat Summit, which we have in the US every year. And the idea is to bring just some of the content that we have in that event down to the local audiences so that we can share them with our customers and partners today. Now, we've also got, as we heard from our compere, a great set of sponsors and partners that are sitting in the audience and showing you their wares outside. And I'd really like to thank them. Who would have thought that such a stellar lineup of sponsors would be here today? More importantly, we've also got a very interesting and revealing open source drives innovation survey result that Tim Sheedy from Forrester will be sharing with us later today. This is the views of about 450 CIOs from across Asia Pacific, telling you just how open source is transforming their business, and I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about that. Now, when I joined Red Hat about 11 and a half years ago, most people, and there weren't that many that knew Red Hat, knew us for driving cost out of IT. And that was by effectively commoditizing the stacks, the proprietary hardware stacks that we'd been using for many years to drive our IT environments. But when I was doing my research before I joined Red Hat, what really struck me was this open source collaborative development model that was at the heart of what Red Hat was doing. And I thought that the potential for the impact that it would have on the IT industry was something that I hadn't experienced in the last 20 years since I'd been at other organizations. And I think fast forwarding today, we see that Red Hat is at the heart of open collaborative application stacks and driving the digital disruption with technologies like mobile, cloud, big data, and containers that we hear a lot about today. In fact, we hear a lot about the poster children that are the beacons of using those types of technologies at shows like this. The Facebooks that don't really own any newspapers or TV stations, but one of the largest media companies in the world. The Ubers that don't own any taxis, but are the largest transportation organization in the world. The Airbnbs that don't own any hotels and one of the largest accommodation providers in the world, and all command huge valuations in their share prices. But what's even more exciting for me and for Red Hat is the potential that we can deliver to traditional organizations and industries to leverage the power of open source to transform and provide the capability that those poster childs are using. At the heart of Red Hat's strategy is the open hybrid cloud, which has open source solutions at every aspect of the application architecture and IT infrastructure to provide the flexibility and agility and to allow you to manage what you want and when you want it. We're going to share some of those ideas today with the great array of speakers that we've lined up for you. And these are the things that have kept me excited for over the last decade at Red Hat. And I'm sure you will find as exciting as I to allow you to figure out how to drive the digital transformation and innovation that your organizations need to seek today to stay competitive in this very competitive, demanding world. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed today, and I will hand over now to the next speaker.
Good morning, and welcome again to the Red Hat Forum. I'm super excited to be here. I've come a long distance. I live in the US, so I've traveled from New York to beautiful Sydney, so it's a great venue. I'm appreciative of that. One of the really cool things about my job at Red Hat is I get to travel and talk to people about what they're doing with our innovative technologies, open source, and the problems that they're addressing. So it's a really cool job. And what I'm going to talk about today is the power of participation and how Red Hat fits into that. So I've been in IT over 30 years. And so like life, IT is sort of full of ups and downs, twists and turns. And it's sort of interesting. I was thinking this morning, it was about a dozen years ago that there were quotes from some very well-respected analysts that said, IT is dead. IT is irrelevant. IT is just a cost center, and it needs to be managed, and it really is not important to the business. Now fast forward to today, and what are we talking about? We're talking about digital transformation, disruption. Everything is becoming digital. Even industries that normally don't go together with digital in the same sentence are now becoming digital. Right? So there's this huge transformation, and IT's gone from almost being dead to now it's the engine that every company is going to have to embrace in order to digitally transform and compete in this new world. And it's changing super fast. Right? If you're looking at the adoption of new technologies, they're coming up fast, they're getting adopted fast, and they're being asserted in business very, very quickly. Okay? So the rate of change is only increasing. Okay, and it's a real challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So as you think about how people are embracing technology, there's a lot of experimentation going on, right? As everybody looks at the new technologies, whether it's big data, mobile, containers, and things like that, and they're trying to apply it to their business problems. There are startups like Uber and Airbnb who are disrupting very stable traditional industries. Right? There's companies who've been around for a long time that are trying to transform, right, and leverage this technology to stay relevant, to fend off these disruptors, right, and to do their own level of disruption, okay, and become competitive. So there's a lot of experimentation going on, and a lot of people trying to navigate these new technologies to figure out how to apply them, right, to their particular business and how to use them to do their own disruption and to maintain competitive edge. So, the collaboration and innovation, that's really about what open source is about. People coming together and working in open source projects and communities, okay? And it's where these ideas come together across a group of people from different industries, locations, different perspectives, and basically bringing these ideas together in a collaborative way, right? I mean, this is foundational to open source. And I think what you're seeing now is that open source is this huge innovation engine, this huge way for new technologies to be introduced and to evolve and mature very, very rapidly and be applied to business very rapidly as well. So the point here is that together, groups can do a lot more than individual companies with proprietary development teams or small groups working in isolation. The collaboration, the participation, right, the engagement can actually move these technologies and mature them very, very quickly. So the theme of this event is the power of participation. And I think there's a couple of different vectors on participation. Obviously, when you participate in an open source community, in an open source project, you're engaged and you're driving features, use cases, code, and things like that. Okay, but there's multiple levels of participation. But I think open source is this tremendous model that's now been proved out for people to participate in where these technologies go. So if you're a business, I'm not saying you have to write code and join an open source project, but you can help drive some of the use cases and some of the directions of where these technologies are going to go. So for the first time, IT and businesses can actually drive technologies and roadmaps. Whereas before, that was very difficult when you had proprietary systems and vendors who had a different agenda. So it's interesting. There's a lot of studies about how IT is changing, right? And CIOs, when you ask them, and there's a number of surveys from different folks that basically all hint at the same thing, which is IT needs to use technology differently. Okay? Historically, as long as I've been in IT, and again, it's probably been over 30 years I've been in IT, a lot of the money in IT has been spent on keeping the lights running, okay? So it's really keeping whatever your business services are just going, and very small amount of money spent on innovation. And now what has to happen is IT needs to change, and they need to spend money on innovation, otherwise they're going to get disrupted, right? And they're going to face existential threats because just keeping the lights on and doing what you were doing before is not going to allow you to compete in the new future, the new digital world. So a lot of CIOs are trying to figure out, okay, how do I modernize and take care of my existing IT and squeeze cost out of that so I can take that money and spend it on innovation, right? The new differentiating services that I'm going to be able to offer to compete in my particular industry. So it's all about disruption. Digital transformation and disruption are macro themes. They're CEO-level themes about digital transformation. Okay? People at the heads of very large global companies are trying to figure out, how do I do digital transformation? Because if I don't figure out how to disrupt my competitors, they're going to disrupt me. And it's an existential challenge. We mentioned Uber before. It's used a lot as an example of a disruptive technology. I can tell you, I'm from the New York area in the US. In New York City, we have taxis. Every taxi has a medallion that's bolted into the hood. Those medallions used to be purchased for $1.2 million from the city of New York. And you could sell them, right? They were assets you could sell and trade and borrow against them. Since Uber's come on the scene, those medallions have dropped 50% in price, and they're now almost illiquid. You can't sell them. Nobody wants to buy them. Why? Because Uber is on the scene, and Uber has basically made that medallion almost worthless, right? So that's the kind of impact where, in the span of a short few years, a stable industry all of a sudden is radically transformed. So disruption really is sort of the new normal, and it's going to continue. There's a lot of technology afoot. I was at the Gartner conference in Orlando a couple of weeks ago, and it's a CIO-level conference, right? And they were talking about the speed of technologies coming from inception to application. And it's an incredible speed, right? So as people look at artificial intelligence and big data, personal digital assistants, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed realities, all these things are coming up very, very fast and are requiring companies to quickly make decisions about what kind of technology they're going to use and what their plan is to stay relevant. So disruption's the new normal. It's not going away. So I would argue that a lot of this is happening because of open source. Okay? Open source started off, as Max said, as a commodity play. We can make operating systems in open source that are cheaper and better than expensive proprietary operating systems. That's how it started. Now what's happened is open source is where the innovation is occurring. There's over 1 million open source projects. So basically what you have is this huge Darwinian sort of test bed for technologies that's occurring in open source. If you look at things like machine learning or big data or mobile or on and on and on, there are open source projects with some very large contributors in all those areas. So I would argue that there's open source innovation projects now that don't even have a proprietary competitor. It's all in open source, right? And so the rate of technology is going very, very fast. Open source has been that engine, okay? And there's over 1 million open source projects. Not every one of them is going to turn into a technology home run or a blockbuster, okay? But there is a process where some of these technologies catch on and they evolve very quickly and mature, and they can be brought to bear. So open source is driving a lot of this innovation and a lot of this disruption, okay? And it really has evolved from a commodity play to an innovation play, and I think that's huge. So in the private sector, CIOs expect their digital revenue to double over the next 5 years. Now here's an interesting sort of challenge to that. I looked at the economic growth for most of the world. It's not doubling, by the way, okay? How are they going to double their revenues? Where's that revenue going to come from? They're going to have to steal or disrupt and take that revenue from somebody else. And how are they going to invest in IT to double their revenue when 70 or 80% of their IT spend is on keeping their traditional services running? So that's a great goal, right? And a lot of them will get there. But what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to modernize and make their existing IT much more efficient. okay, and then try to apply some of those savings and some of that new spend to innovation. Okay, and so that's a theme that we're seeing globally, is that there's really two projects that CIOs are looking at strategically. Modernize and squeeze cost out of their existing IT, and then innovate on the other side. It's two sort of separate projects, but both of them competing for funding and attention. Otherwise, the economics are not going to work out. You're not going to be able to double the revenue over the next 5 years. Now, what's interesting is that Red Hat was really one of the originators of the open source culture. Okay, about 20 years ago, Red Hat started obviously on Linux. Most people know us for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Okay, there's a very tight association there. It is the premier open source platform for people to run their workloads, right, across all different areas. Over the years, Red Hat's expanded into many, many other areas: virtualization, storage, management, middleware, DevOps, and we continue to expand. But I would argue that Linux in some ways was almost the original disruptor, right? It changed the way people thought about operating systems and about open source. We proved open source could be viable and could be used for enterprise critical things, whether that was a stock exchange or an airline or healthcare or some critical function. We proved that open source was enterprise grade, okay, and could be used in those kind of applications. So I would argue that Red Hat 20 years ago was probably the source of a lot of disruption going on even today. All the public cloud providers are running on some form of Linux, right? That again was driven by a lot of Red Hat's work in open sourcing and making Linux enterprise grade, right? A lot of the technologies and stuff that are going on now came from that original open source Linux drive that Red Hat was involved in. Also, we've innovated on the business model side. Okay, Red Hat created this subscription model, okay, which is very different than what everybody else was doing at the time. And basically what we said is people don't want to buy software and then pay maintenance for it. Basically, as a subscription, they get continuous updates, service, value, and support for the things that they're using in IT. So it was as innovative a business model as it was a technology model. And a lot of things have grown since then. So as Max mentioned earlier, our vision over the past 5 years, our public stated position, has been around what we call the open hybrid cloud. Everybody is or will be in a hybrid cloud scenario. There's lots of surveys from all different analyst firms, right, that show that hybrid is the way that people are or will be in the future, to very, very high percentages. Open, we think a lot of the technology in those hybrid clouds is and should be based on open source. So Red Hat believes in the open hybrid cloud. You're not going to want to get locked in to technologies or providers at any level of your IT stack that are going to limit you, right? So the open hybrid cloud is really sort of the high-level strategic goal, if you will. And basically, it's about open source solutions that are infused in every aspect of your IT. So, I mentioned before there's over 1 million open source projects. Red Hat doesn't participate in all 1 million open source projects. That's not our goal, okay? What we do, however, is we participate in critical projects and communities, okay, that we think are essential building blocks for IT to be able to build these open hybrid clouds, whether they're using containers or mobile, IoT, whatever the technologies are. There's a critical subset of these open source projects and technologies that we think are essential. That's where Red Hat gets involved. What we do is we take innovation that's going on in these projects and communities, and we make it enterprise consumable. You can't just go and download bits off the internet, put it in your production environment and start running and stay compliant and secure, right? And make sure you have availability and reliability and all those things that you need. So what Red Hat does is Red Hat makes the open source innovations enterprise consumable. The integration, the testing, the certification, right? The ecosystem around all of those things that allow enterprises to be able to consume it. Also, many times, solutions are made of more than one project, right? We have to federate communities that have very, very different goals and different technologies. We bring them together and we integrate them for enterprises to consume. That's sort of Red Hat core DNA, the ability to take those and to make those innovative technologies consumable by end users, and then be able to do that on a continuous basis. And it's also about the ecosystem. It's not just about code. Okay? It's about all the things that you need from training, certification, integration, hardening, right? Ongoing support and patches for things that may last for years in your environment. So the ecosystem is super important, and a lot of people sort of miss that. I would argue that there's sort of open source washing, if you will. Open source is very trendy now. So almost every company has an open source something, right? They want to be trendy, right? They have some code, and they've open sourced it, and they create a community. That's not the same as like doing open source innovation, okay? There's sort of big differences between just open sourcing some code under some particular license and actually having a community of people that are working around it and innovating it, and then making consumable enterprise-grade solutions out of it. So those are areas that Red Hat sort of excels in. So if you look at the stack, if you will, even though there's a lot of transformation going on, a lot of disruption, a lot of new technologies, at the end of the day, you still need to run workloads somewhere on infrastructure. You're still going to build new applications with new technologies, whether they're for mobile or embedded devices or whatever the nature is, right? You're still going to have to manage these tools. There's a lot more focus on development and developer enablement and tools and DevOps and things like that. So when you look at the stack of things that people need, okay, as I mentioned, Red Hat is in all of these areas, in the critical projects and the critical technologies, okay, that are around these different areas. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart, but this shows you how much Red Hat is involved in all these different areas. The nice thing is you don't have to consume all of this or nothing. It's not binary. There's many people who say, look, I need to start with my infrastructure, or I need to start with my management, or I need to start with applications. There are people who take different pieces of the open source technologies that we provide and apply them to different parts of their current IT problems. Sometimes it's the modernization of the existing platforms they have. Other times it's on the front end of the innovation. They want to build their new container-based, mobile front-ended big data application. Great, we've got technology for that too. But what we're seeing is a trend where we have customers and partners coming to us saying, Red Hat, you know how to do this. Be a trusted advisor for us. So if you've seen, like we have customers like BBVA that have taken public positions saying, we're transforming all of our digital banking, and we're betting on Red Hat. We're betting on the open source technologies. We're betting on their expertise and their partnership. We want to do it all in open. Okay, and Red Hat's our trusted advisor to help us through this. We're seeing more and more that kind of relationship with Red Hat, where it's a strategic, trusted advisor relationship with Red Hat and the partners around building these open-based, digital transformation environments. Now, one of the things we think is important as part of the open hybrid cloud is the ability to be able to run your workloads and your services anywhere. Okay, physical, virtual, private, and public clouds. There are folks who 5 years ago said, we're moving everything to the public cloud. And then they started looking at the cost or the compliance or the data residency or a whole set of issues and said, well, that's not really going to work. We're going to have some stuff in public cloud, and we're going to have some stuff on-premise. Or they said, this sounds great, this public cloud stuff, and they ran all the stuff there, and they said, wow, it's really expensive. Let me bring it back. So what we're seeing is we're sort of seeing real hybrid cloud as sort of the stable state that people are going to. Some of their workloads are going to be in one or more public clouds. Some of it's going to be running internally on private clouds or on vert platforms. Other stuff is going to be optimized to run on physical servers, whether it's containers or big data, where they're really trying to get every last cycle out of their hardware. So the good news is that we believe the technology needs to insulate you from having a dependency on any one of those. So if tomorrow you decide you want to open up a new market, you've acquired a new company, you want to change where you run or how you run your workloads and services, you're not locked into any one of those footprints. So the ability to run your workloads and services on any or all of those, right, in the same fashion, we think is really important. And that's one of the things in our open hybrid cloud. Now, it's important that when you look at who you're going to work with and who your strategic partners and your trusted advisors are, that you have somebody who knows the particular area. So Red Hat open source is in our DNA. We're a large public company where 100% of the software that we provide to our customers and partners is all built on open source. There's many companies that have some open source and they've got proprietary or open core or other things. Red Hat's all open. We do all of our work in the upstream first, which means it happens in the community, and then we take it and we productize it. There are other people who sort of play games with some of the open source dynamics. I could tell you there's several companies that Red Hat has bought. We bought ManageIQ, which is our cloud management solution. We bought Feed Henry, which is one of our mobile platform solutions. Those companies were closed code. Red Hat bought those companies, paid handsome amount for them, totally open sourced the code, and made it available in this innovation, open source, upstream community fashion. That no one else is doing that. People buy things, they kind of keep it proprietary. Red Hat's like, look, it's much better for it to evolve and to grow totally in the open than to keep it private reserve and play games with the roadmap and features and things like that. So Red Hat is all in on the open. And now, years ago, when we used to sell open source anything to an enterprise, it was a big deal. It was an exception. You got legal people. They're like, I'm not so sure about this. What about indemnification? What about IP and support and all this kind of other stuff? Now it's mainstream. Open source is mainstream. We're talking to customers and government agencies and things like that that are saying, I have an open first or an open only policy. When I'm looking to buy technology, now I want it to be open. Why? Because I can see what's going on. I can maybe contribute to the use cases or even the code to advance it for my needs. Okay? I have the choice of multiple suppliers. If I don't like the supplier that's providing my open source based version of that technology, I can shift and get it somewhere else. If I have my own engineers, I could even support it myself if I was so inclined. So a lot of people have, it's sort of moved from the exception-based thing to its mainstream, and now it's almost becoming a standard where there are literally some government agencies in the world that are saying, all solutions, if there's an open version of a particular thing that we want to bring into the environment, we're going to have a preference for that. Very, very far change. Meanwhile, Red Hat's been doing this for 20 years. It's in our DNA. And I think that's a big deal. So when you think about disruption, differentiation, digital transformation, Red Hat believes that if you're a bank or you're a healthcare company, or if you're transportation or travel or media, whatever it is, that your folks should be focused on building your differentiating set of services and application, not building an operating system, or not building networking, or not building storage. Okay, so we're providing those bedrock pieces, okay, that we think you should be consuming, and we think your people should be focused on your core business and differentiating, leveraging those technologies to beat your competition, to get there first, to disrupt them, right, and to be competitive in the future. So it's very, very different. You should kind of let trusted folks like Red Hat provide the critical infrastructure pieces and building blocks, and then you build the differentiating services and capabilities that are particular to your particular vertical or your environment. Now, we have a number of customers, right? This is an example of some of the customers across different areas. We have a lot of reference customers. Red Hat is global, so I do get to travel and talk to folks all over the world across all different verticals, right, that are doing really interesting, innovative things with Red Hat. Here's an example of some of our customers across a couple of different areas. This slide, I think, is one thing that most people don't know about Red Hat. We are behind a lot of the particular industries, okay, that you use all the time, okay? And, Red Hat is powering stock exchanges. We're providing software for telcos and airplanes and healthcare and government agencies all over the world. True story, I got on my flight from New York to Sydney the other day, and state-of-the-art, latest airplane, right? And they're rebooting the entertainment system, and I look, and it's Red Hat Linux powering the entertainment system on the plane. And I'm thinking, God, this is pervasive. It's if I trade stock, it's probably going on a Red Hat software in the back of the exchange. I'm sitting on a plane, I'm seeing the Red Hat on the infotainment system on there. but embedded devices for IoT, again, some of the innovative systems that are being built all over the world are leveraging Red Hat software in the back. And a lot of people don't know this. It's sort of a well-kept secret that we're trying to make much more public in market. But Red Hat is a very significant provider and a trusted provider and an open source leader. So we've been in the business for 20 years, particularly focused on open source technology. We keep disrupting, hopefully in a good way for you. And we have lots of customers, lots of references. So one last sort of comment about open source and innovation and things like that. It's not about the code. Okay? There's a lot of engineering guys who are building brilliant technology out there to make it consumable, to be able to use this in your business, right? And to be able to bring it in, leverage it, and rely on it on a go-forward basis. It takes more than engineering. It takes the culture, the partners, the integration, the expertise in order to do that. Again, it takes that participation and the leadership that Red Hat is really good at. So hope you use this unique opportunity at Red Hat Forum here to interact with the Red Hat team, our partners, and each other to hear about the different innovative things people are doing and the approaches they have. And power participation, that's where open source is all about. And it starts here. So thank you.